Beneath vast oceans, hidden in the sea floor, lost treasures have remained untouched for centuries. Searching often leads only to disappointment, until the moment a diver's hand brushes away sediment and reaches hundreds of years back in time.
What I thought was a lump of hardpan, and I decided that this lump that I had, was in the way, and I went to move it, and eventually managed to flip it over, and it turned out to be a 33-pound gold bar.
Gold, silver, jewels, a lost treasure not seen since the Spanish galleon Maravillas sank 40 miles off the coast of Grand Bahama Island in 1656. Locating the wreck and her treasure took years of research and planning, specialized equipment, hundreds of dives searching the sea floor, and still sometimes it comes down to a little bit of luck.
We were off in an area that we had never searched. It was an area of hardpan, which is, sort of exposed flat limestone with very little growth, no hard corals, just a few soft coral fans and some very shallow areas of sand, maybe only a few inches deep, maybe a foot deep. Certainly perfect terrain for metal detecting with the handheld metal detectors. And my partner Dewey, he came across a target. My metal detector had died, so we had pretty much joined up at that point because he had a operating metal detector. And
I had the old Garrett metal detector that I absolutely hated. We swam out away from the boat. I actually set the metal detector down to clear my mask, and it went berserk. And then I started calling you over, and we started finding gold bars.
We were on our way back to the boat, more or less. We'd been out probably an hour, and Dewey waved me over, and he had something, and I come over, and in his hand he was holding about a 2-pound gold bar. And I think those were the first and potentially the only gold bars we found in that area. And I couldn't believe it. And as his metal detector had a visual gauge or needle on it, so I was able to see what he was hearing when there was a target. So I'd see the needle jump, and I'd start digging, and before long we had 20 plus gold bars in our hands, and we were continuing on, and at the same location, and he was moving the metal detector. We figured we had it all, and then the metal detector would spike, and we'd look, and it was just rock or just hardpan, and he'd move it across the area again, and it would spike, and it was just hardpan. And I had my hand on what I thought was a lump of hardpan, and I decided that this lump that I had was in the way, and I went to move it, and eventually managed to flip it over, and it turned out to be a 33-pound gold bar with a nice soft coral growing out of the top of it in disguise, and the bottom of it was shiny gold. The top, the other sides of it, and it was about the size of a brick. Had all encrusted over, so you couldn't identify it until you'd flipped it over and saw the protected side. So we just about killed ourselves swimming back to the boat with our pockets full of gold. We had combined weight of 100 pounds or so.
I remember the swim back, you telling me, slow down. This is going to be over when we get on the deck. It's no longer our gold, it's everybody else's.
Well, we tossed it up on the deck. Everybody came rushing from every corner of the vessel. Herbo was on board that day.
Herbo, how's it feel?
It feels great. Waited a long time for this, and there's a lot more out there. We're going to go get it this afternoon and next week and next year. We're all ready.
We put out these gold bars. I don't remember exactly how many we managed to carry back with us without killing ourselves and drowning. But we had to leave the 33-pound bar behind because we just couldn't manage to carry it all. And So after we got through with the hooting and the hollering and everybody, we said, well, we left the big one behind, and they couldn't believe that we'd left one behind. But in those days we were pretty good underwater. There was no trouble swimming back to that same location, especially knowing what was waiting.
Putting that on the deck with you was a pretty special moment. It's one I'll never forget. There aren't a lot of guys out there that got to find 100 pounds of gold in one dive.
They called it the Gold Day. Eventually, they would recover hundreds of pounds of gold, silver bars, and thousands of coins. These divers would soon make many other golden discoveries on the ocean floor, more than they dared dream when they first joined the underwater salvage operation.
Diving several years before, and I was already traveling at the time, so I heard that Cayman had an opportunity, or had opportunities for dive masters, so off I went, newly married, $50 in my pocket, got a job pretty quick in the Cayman Islands, worked for several years for a good company, and we operated off the beach at the Holiday Inn. We kept our boats anchored offshore there, and one day I was approached by the owner of our company to do a private charter for the owner of the Holiday Inn, Mr. Herbo Humphreys, and take his family and young children, two very young children, out for a few hours. So off I went and hit it off with Herbo, and he subsequently offered me a job to go up and work on the beacon in the Bahamas, where they were currently working on a wreck called the Maravillas.
Herbo, a character, definitely a character, but none of the stuff we got to do would have been done without his drive and his will to pursue it.
Herbo is Herbert Humphreys, the founder of Marex International, a company that specialized in hunting for sunken treasure. Herbo had been fascinated with lost treasure since he was a boy. His passion and leadership was the force that drove the underwater salvage expeditions.
When I had the opportunity to go treasure hunting, I jumped at it, but who wouldn't, I think, especially living in the diving world like we were.
I was at Aqua Delights at the Holiday Inn, and they told me that Andrew was leaving the island and going treasure hunting, and they were looking for some more divers. I raised my hand and said, I'm in. And 2 weeks later, I sold my company on the island and was gone.
Immediately, sort of thrust into the world of mystery and pirates and history, and it became it's quite consuming, actually. If you once you're in it, it's what you think about, it's what you dream about. You can't typically you can't wait to get up and get started each day.
Marex International took over salvage operations on the Maravillas wreck. They assembled a team of divers. For months each year, the research vessel Beacon was their home on the sea.
Well, I remember it pretty fondly, actually. I mean, it was, there was good camaraderie in the crew most of the time. We all liked each other. We all got along. We all knew our jobs for the most part. There was a few that didn't, but they either didn't last long or got sorted out pretty quickly. We ate a lot. We slept a lot. We worked a lot. We were generally only out in decent weather because that was only the weather we could work in.
Any moment can be a rush, but any dive can be slow and drawn out. And it was always fun. You never knew what was going to swim by. I mean, I recall one day the tiger shark came by and everybody jumped out of the water, and I went and banged on the back of the deck and said, give me the video camera, and went back down to film the tiger shark.
The crew hailed from every corner of the earth, a cast of characters who became a family, all possessing unique skills, each person vital to the success of the operation.
The crew, the permanent crew, we had a cook from Honduras, we had a engineer from Jamaica, we had a chief engineer from the Cayman Islands.
Kim Jackson, Kamanian, I don't think he was quite right. I mean, in a nice way. But he would entertain the world with his magic tricks, and he would always have a new one when he got back to the boat. And we worked really hard at making life on the boat fun.
We had a captain, ex-U.S. Coast Guard.
And then there was Captain Art. And Captain Art, U.S. Coast Guard, and he had all these wayward souls on board the boat with him. And to me it seemed his goal was to make us into sailors, teaching us how to braid line and navigate. And I mean, he would get out the thing to do celestial star stuff and do moon sightings and sun sightings and just trying to make us better. In fact, he did a pretty good job of it. I ended up with my 200-ton captain's license, and I owe most of that to Art Villar, our captain. I actually had to dock the boat one time. Kim Jackson said, "You're the captain, you drive it." Art was gone for some reason, and so I got to dock the boat one time in West End. That's a scary thought when you're going in there with a 110-foot steel-hulled ship and going to pull it up on a dock and not run into it. And Kim's big thing to me was, or Art used to say it, you can never go too slow. Take your time. You're going to get there eventually. But don't go in there in a hurry, because that's when you get in trouble.
Arnie was a workhorse, boy. I don't know when Arnie started. It was certainly before I did. And, Arnie would dive from sun up till sundown. You couldn't slow him down. He was a machine. And he had a nose for finding things, and he was great with a metal detector. He trained, certainly me and several others that came around the same time to dive under the blowers and identify things that appeared in the hole, and Arnie was great.
Artie was not, however, a fan of the early computers that signaled divers when it was time to make their way back to the surface.
So we were all to use these dive computers, even though we were diving in pretty shallow water. We were generally 30 feet or less. And we never really took a lot of concern about bottom time. So we all got these dive computers, and we decided that we were going to use them, and off we went. And so not long after, Arnie had maxed out his computer, and he looked at this thing and it's beeping at him, and he just took it off his regulator, threw it on the deck, and said, "Out of here," and he got back in the water and carried on. And I said to him, later, aren't you worried about the bends, about getting bent? And he goes, no. He said, I just, at night, I lay really straight and flat in my bunk, and I don't worry about that kind of thing. I don't worry about the bends. We had another guy that we shanghaied from that very same bar, Bahama Mamas. Yeah.
One day, Andrew comes, I ruptured my eardrum, and Captain Art goes, "We're short a diver, because Andrew's not going to be able to get in the water. He can be on the boat, but he can't dive." And he said, "Go find me a diver." So I went in and was talking to Quinn, our favorite bartender, and just kept feeding him alcohol and talking to him about it, telling him when he would like to go on a trip with us, and this or that. And, one thing led to another. The next thing you know, he woke up the next morning and he was 12 miles out at sea. And he comes running up and goes to Captain Art Villar. "Cap, I got to go back. I got a bartending shift the next day." And Cap looks at him and says, "No, you're here for 11 days. You can either dive and treasure hunt it, and I will give you a check at the end, or you can sit here and do nothing. It's your call, but we're not going back for 11 days. And Quinn never left the boat.
Quinn spent his days on the boat diving and learning how to spot treasure hidden by the passage of time. Life at sea was not all work, not when huge waves were spotted breaking in the distance. Some of the crew jumped in a small boat to go visit the thundering surf.
Commander Skinner about to partake on one of the craziest missions ever taken on the Beacon. See the breaking surf over there? Yeah, well, that's where we're headed. Unbelievable. But Lord Ronzo, I don't know if he's coming. Where is he? Oh, we are taking the Limey with us. All right. Oh, a spot of tea before we go. Captain Andrew boards his well-crafted sailing vessel. Actually, it's motorized. It's called a Corvette. Might be its last season. We're not sure. Retired to Port Lucaya. This could be its maiden voyage into hell. Oh, here he is. Tea and crumpets, the whole bit. Lord Ronzo towel, music.
We're going on a picnic.
It's a picnic to the bank. Known for his awesome timing and grace. There they are. Stirring me. Ah! Mr. King greets us off on our journey. Chief Commandant and Chevalier on the bows of the Beacon. Okay. Big moment. We're about to meet the winner of the Twin of the Year contest, Lord Ronzo. Hi guys, it's me. We'll be back with more after this on the surf competition. Here we are live on the Corvette at the Sea Trials Recertification and Safety Inspection of this mighty vessel. We're now going to discuss this with Chief Engineer, Mr. Dougal.
Hello people, I had to come on the Corvette because the engine is a bit unreliable, but I brought rubber bands with me and a little windy handle. The dive supervisor will now tell you more. Andrew, over to you.
Mr. Skinner, and you, are we seaworthy?
Yes, no, absolutely, yes. Oh, nowhere, bloody not. No. Dewey, put your finger back in the hole.
So, dudes, this is a surf report. We're out here on the north shore of the Bahama Bank. Look at them, they're breaking. It's awesome. Be here.
Legendary treasure hunter Robert Bob Marks spent years researching various archives to find clues to the location of the Maravilla. He finally located the bow section of the wreck in 1972 and salvaged more than 1,700 coins and many artifacts. He lost his contract after a disagreement with the Bahamian government and was banned from the Bahamas.
You've read about it, you've heard about it. It's the thing we've all been talking about. The mysterious Bob Marks barrel. Things that exist. Chevalier prepares to pull in the line so he can get closer to us, Louis. Oh! Kim Jackson, engineer extraordinaire, Mr. Dougal. And Joe Hollywood about to go wheat diving.
These visitors arrived at the Beacon quite literally out of the blue. Spotted dolphins, enjoying, it would appear, a dance with the humans. After these brief interludes, it's back to the tasks at hand.
Well, I remember swimming over the hard pan and swimming up to it, and I'm seeing 2 lobster traps, one on each side of it, and there is a 75-pound silver bar sitting on the hard pan. Now, it's got growth over it, it's encrusted, but what you learned to do was look for man-made shapes on the bottom, because if it was a man-made shape, more than likely it was man-made. You know, we all had multiple tasks on board the boat. I mean, my task was to be a diver, take still photography, and run the computer system. And at that point, there were very few people on board the ship that even knew what a computer was, let alone how to use one. And we were just processing from LORAN to GPS. There were fewer satellites in the sky. So we were on the edge of technology. I'm not saying we were breaking ground in any sense of the imagination. We were just using what was available.
Large metal objects buried in the sediment, like a cannon or anchor, were located using a process called magging.
What's magging? Well, you drag a thing behind the boat, and it looks at the electrical field. You see an anomaly, you throw a buoy over. You turn around 180 degrees, you go back. You throw a buoy over when you get the hit again. And then you go east and west over it, drop a buoy when you get the hit, if you get it, and then come back the other direction, west to east, and drop a buoy. And somewhere in that little crosshair is something metal, and it's affecting the magnetic field of the Earth. And it depends on what it is. If it's an anchor, cannon, just a ballast pile with lots of metal objects in it.
Before they could raise a cannon or even an ounce of gold from the sea floor, Marix needed to raise money to pay for the salvage expedition. They sought out investors willing to take a financial risk for the potential of sharing a fortune in lost treasure. But there was no guarantee they would find anything of significant value.
You know, we had a program that was a limited partnership. It was on an annual basis, and we would attempt to raise sufficient money to fund us for the season. So we would go out and look for investors that wanted to put up some money and be a part of the dream of the mother lode of the Maravilla, and many did. You know, it was very speculative. It was a high risk. That was always a big part of the pitch. We didn't go after folks that couldn't afford to potentially lose their investment, and there was a lot of people that participated, and they also got an opportunity to come out on the site, on an active site. Initially we would bring them out on board the beacon itself and allow them to stay sometimes for the entire trip, which generally was up to 2 weeks or so. Allow them to dive, but after a while it got a little problematic with because not all of them were divers. Some of them were, and you know, they certainly weren't commercial divers, and there were safety concerns and things. So we ended up chartering a live-aboard dive boat eventually and brought them out in groups, which worked out very well. And I've kept in touch actually with some of them. I've seen them, you know, various times since we were there, and they have the great stories. They say they wouldn't have done it any other way. Certainly not all of them got their money back. Some of them got some money, but the general opinion of the ones that I've spoken with was it was just a great opportunity to be a part of something. They got to come out there. They've got the stories. You know, it was a great vacation, and albeit potentially an expensive one.
Some of the best stories were told by the Maravilla herself. Discovered within her treasure was a wealth of history.
4 bags of coins. They were just a clump. The bag had rotted away. and they were there, and they were the counter-stamped coins. What had happened is the guy that mints the coins was cheating and putting more copper in the coins, and they were only 80% pure as opposed to 100% pure. So the king decreed that all coins had to have a counter stamp on it so that when people saw it, they knew that they were pure silver again. And if you look at one of the coins, you'll see where there's another crest been pounded into it after the initial stamping. And those were pretty cool. There weren't a lot of them out there, and we had 4 bags actually.
Archaeologists joined the expedition, helping to make sure that treasure and artifacts found in the shipwreck were carefully documented.
And these guys would teach us the history and try to get us to become better archaeologists. And I think as time progressed, we did. I mean, we made wonderful charts. We mapped everything correctly. We had it mapped on the computer, which was very rare at that time. I was goofing with the computer. And
Some salvage divers have earned a sullied reputation for pillaging shipwrecks, with little regard for the historical value of the treasure and what it can teach us about our past. But that would not be the fate of the ill-fated Maravilla.
We did quite a bit to try and not only record, but use proper practices, let's call them. Because there is sort of definitely a general sense that the treasure hunting community is a rape and pillage, and so when I came on board, I had been in my previous job doing a lot of underwater video, so I brought all my equipment along, and we started to record finds as they were found. So we documented anomalies and different things that came along prior to disturbing them so that we could preserve the original state that they were found in. We would do a bunch of video, we would take measurements, we would do drawings, we would do photo mosaics to try and record the find prior to hauling it up on deck. I mean, obviously lots of pictures were taken after the fact for records and for preservation purposes, but we brought in the element of trying to record it prior to disturbing it from its original place.
Andrew found this coin hole, and rather than diving in and digging it all up right away, that's really at the time where we started really documenting a find before it was salvaged, which continued till the end of our time on the boat. And we went down with a camera. Andrew, we surveyed the site without anybody in it. Then Andrew went in and started metal detecting, and it turned out, I don't know how many coins were in that hole, but there was a ton of them. And that kind of stuff just became second nature to us, to try to document the stuff and do some of the archaeology. It was still a boy's dream of being a pirate at sea, don't get me wrong, but at some point you had to try to learn to be more caring about history. And I think, just because it was there and we could bring it up, let's tell the history of it.
Some of their methods for finding sunken treasure have been around for years.
Blowers, or also known as mailboxes, on the back of the boat for digging through sand. There was airlifts for vacuuming areas. Those things had existed in the past and are still used today. But the electronics part of it was there really was very little. I mean, there was metal detectors like you see folks using on the beach. Those we were using a marine version of those.
Diving under the blowers. The first time you did it, what a rush. Because you have this big funnel of water shooting down. for the props, and on the beacon they were 55-inch props, and they blew 1400 RPM. So that's a nice downforce. I mean, we could blow a hole almost 25 feet deep in the sand and get down to the hard pad. So definitely was some thrust there. There are a couple of rules. One, if you got into the dust that was being blown up, stay on the bottom and swim till you can see daylight. Do not surface in the mud because you don't know where you are. Okay? And the other thing that was really cool about it is you could find a buoyancy point about 3 feet off the bottom where the thrust was passing underneath you, and you could just hover and sit and look at all this clear water coming down and watch for stuff. And if you found something or saw something you thought looked interesting, you make one kick and you're forced down to the bottom and you grab onto it, and then you kind of tumble out of the hole and re-get your balance and come back and do it again.
Newer technology was also put to use for the first time in shipwreck archaeology. One device of their own invention is credited with making a remarkable discovery.
We also brought in other technology to try and see if it applied to what we were doing, like like the chirps system. We used sonar, side scan sonar. We used magnetometers to measure the magnetic field of the Earth, looking for disturbances that are there when the man-made iron objects are laying on the bottom. One of our teams developed a very large metal detector that can be towed behind a boat that actually dragged on the bottom, which had never been seen before, so it could cover a large territory. And ultimately that sled, we called it, resulted in some major finds that we may not have come across otherwise, that the magnetometer wouldn't have picked up. Worked very well for seeing the things that ultimately had the greatest value to us at the time, which was gold and silver, and it ultimately led to a major discovery, the Tumbaga bars, and ultimately the mystery wreck.
The Tumbaga bars were a spectacular discovery. But surrounding the bars on the sea floor, divers found no trace of a shipwreck. Tumbaga bars are a mixture of copper, silver, and gold, telling yet another story from 400 years in the past.
Well, the Tumbaga bars, I'm not sure where the actual name comes from, but at the time that we discovered them, they were the earliest known bars coming out of the New World. And there was an assortment of dozens and dozens of bars of every shape, weight, and color. And when I say color, some were gray, some were green from the copper content, some were black from the silver content. So they were basically made up of melted down artifacts that were discovered in the New World and melted down for shipping purposes. So they had platinum, silver, gold, copper, all these different metals that were just sort of dumped into a melting pot. And I don't think they really cared at the time that the metals were mixed together, because they could certainly go and separate them back home. So it was really just about, they were pagan artifacts, they didn't care about them, they didn't see any value in them being in the shape and design that they were, so they chucked them all in a big pot, melted them down.
Not far from where the Tumbaga bars were discovered, the treasure hunters came upon fragments of a shipwreck, possibly 100 years older than the Maravillas. It came to be known as the Mystery Wreck, and it yielded a vast assortment of tools and weapons, including a very well-preserved bronze cannon.
Well, the bronze cannon we discovered shortly after the Tumbaga bars, because the Tumbaga bars brought us to the area where ultimately we discovered what we call the Mystery Wreck. And on this wreck, we discovered just a variety of very interesting artifacts. One of the main ones was the Henry VIII bronze cannon. It was in beautiful condition. It was founded by John and Robert Owen, in beautiful carving across the top of the barrel. It said it had the Tudor rose. It had Henricus Octavus, and then under that it said John and Robert Owen made this piece Anno Domino 1543. So this was a very early gun. Certainly something that we didn't expect to discover in that area. And as well as the bronze cannon, there was 2 iron guns, 2 8-foot big iron guns. There was a breech loading rail gun that was quite rare and hadn't really been seen certainly from that area. There was a lot of very interesting ordnance, from spike shot and split shot. There was a lot of musket balls. There was some coins. There was some elephant tusks that were in very good condition, surprisingly. There was some navigational instruments. There was one anchor, a large piece of deck that laid underneath this pile. But certainly it wasn't a whole ship. It was a chunk of the deck or stern area of a larger vessel that had broke apart. It's most likely the Tumbaga bars, which were completely alone and all by themselves. No ballast, no iron to speak of, just a big pile of bars, and then not far away was the mystery wreck. So there's thought that those were tied together, but where the rest of the ship went, nobody knows to date.
In the beginning, Rene was on board the boat, and that was a piece of work, just to say the least. And he had his salvage, his restoration area, on the second deck, up above by the main stove. And he was up there, and he'd putter away and have acid all over the place, and have this curing and that aging and doing that. And eventually it became time that we couldn't do this on the boat, and we opened the shop up in Port Lucaya. And he got his own shop and was doing the restoration there, and we had a place to sell stuff. It was really a fun place to visit. Most of the stuff, like anchors and that, stayed on the bottom. The preservation process to restore an anchor is like a 3 to 5 year process, and having a tank big enough to soak it, to get the salt out of the iron, and then get it into a state where it's not going to just keep peeling apart over time.
Some of the most beautiful and haunting artifacts they uncovered and worked carefully to preserve were not made of gold or silver or any kind of precious metal.
There was a big, huge emerald. It was huge, one of the largest, and trying to preserve that and keep it in one piece was quite the task. I give Rene a lot of credit for working hard on that one.
There was one more shipwreck still to be explored in this expedition, but this recovery effort would prove to be the most dangerous. The wreckage of the treasure ship El Cazador was discovered accidentally by the crew of a fishing boat 50 miles off the coast of Louisiana. El Cazador came to rest 300 feet below the surface. 2 remotely operated vehicles were brought in to assist with the salvage operation. One of the ROVs custom configured for the challenges presented by the depth of the shipwreck. A team of tech divers also joined the operation and recovered the ship's bell. Equipment on the beacon was put to use in some unique ways.
By using a pelican hook, syntactic foam, and what we would do is use the pelican hook to hold the clamshell bucket open, lower it down, and then the syntactic foam, once it sat on the bottom and we let the cable go slack, the syntactic ball foam pressure from being at 300 feet would pull the shackle off of the pelican hook. It would fall open, and now when we pull the cable, it would close the clamshell bucket. And then we would bring it up to the deck, get it over the bulwarks, get it on board, and then open it up, and there'd be this big pile of mud. You just never knew what was inside that mud. And we salvaged a lot of coins on that. And the technical drivers brought back the bell. So that was a whole new learning experience, and then that kind of just was the end of the salvage diving for myself. And I moved on and back into the video business.
The Marek salvage divers recovered thousands of coins and the ship's bell from the Cazador. Their discoveries over the years have made news around the world, from local evening newscasts to national programs like Public Broadcasting's Nova. Many of the items recovered were sold at auction, attracting worldwide attention. Some of the items made their way back to Spain, their original destination. The government of the Bahamas, by law, was paid 1/4 of the value of the items recovered from the Maravilla. Other money raised at auction was used to pay back investors. As for the crew of the Beacon and the divers who found a stunning wealth of lost treasure more than 30 years ago, the question is often asked,
Would you do it again?
In a heartbeat. Tomorrow.
Would you go back and do it again, given the opportunity?
When do we leave?
Do you think we left anything behind?
I think you could never find it all. I bet if I went back there today, I could come back up with coins.
divers recovered amazing treasure from the Maravilla wreck, but her mother lode has yet to be found. As the Beacon's chief engineer, Kim Jackson, put it, the one thing we know for sure is where the Maravilla isn't.